That Christmas, my grandparents gave their granddaughter an ATV, recorded a clip, and posted it online, praising childhood freedom. But did not even look at Ethan, did not even wish him Merry Christmas, insulted and hurt. I began a cold revenge. I withdrew my son from the toxic cycle, completely cut off contact, and quietly turned Ethan into a symbol of a movement to support children's mental health. If you love real-life stories, chilling revenge and dark family secrets, hit that subscribe button now. You're about to step into a world where the truth is far more terrifying than fiction. I didn't realize this would be the last Christmas I ever spent in my parents' house, until the moment the tarp came off the ATV. Before that, it was just another December 24th on the calendar. Messy, noisy, predictable in all the worst ways. Same house, same arguments, same decorations pulled from the same dusty boxes in the basement. And like every year, I told myself, just endure one night for my son. He shook his head, then quickly nodded, then shook it again as if he couldn't decide what to feel. Typical Ethan. Feelings folding over themselves like waves that didn't know where to break. Maybe just a little, he finally said. I turned the volume down until the singer's voice faded into a faint background hum, more like wallpaper than sound. Better, I asked. Yeah. He pulled his knees up, hugging them to his chest. I just don't like noises. I don't know noises I can't predict. I smiled a little, even though he couldn't see it. That makes sense. It did. It made more sense than half the things my parents said about him. My parents. I could already picture the house as we turned down their street. The over-the-top light display my dad insisted on adding to every year, the blown-up snowman on the lawn that had terrified Ethan when he was 4. The wreath that had hung on that same door since I was a teenager. The house never changed, and somehow that constancy made me more anxious than any kind of chaos could. I slowed the car as we turned into their neighborhood. The snow a thick white curtain now. Every house on the cul-de-sac had the same copy-paste decorations, white lights, red bows, plastic reindeer. But my parents' house, the one at the very end, always acted like it had something to prove. Light strands crisscrossed the roofline. Candy cane stakes lined the walk. There was even a fake North Pole sign stuck into the front yard. And tonight, in the middle of all that, was something new. A huge shape in the front yard covered in a green tarp, wrapped with a giant red bow. Ethan sat up straighter. Whoa, what's that? I already knew I'd heard about it in a phone call I wasn't supposed to be listening to. Mom on speaker with Amanda, my older sister, talking like the entire universe revolved around Amanda's daughter. She's going to love it, Mom had said, her voice sugary with excitement. A little ATV like that. Oh, Lily, she'll remember this Christmas all her life. It's important to give them big experiences while they're young. While they're young. While they're young. As if Ethan didn't exist inside the same ticking time. Probably Grandpa's big surprise. I answered, forcing my voice to stay neutral. Looks pretty big, right? Yeah, Ethan breathed. Do you think? Is it for everyone to share? There was that word again. Everyone. The word that never seemed to include him when it came out of my parents' mouths. Maybe I said lightly, even though my stomach was turning. We'll see when we get inside. We pulled into the driveway, tires crunching over iced slush. I parked in the spot that was always my spot when I came over, not too close to the garage, not blocking the curb, not in Dad's way if he needed to back his car out. Years of training made my hands move without thinking. Ethan stayed still for a second, staring at the glowing house. He always did this, the pause before stepping into a place that made him feel small and wrong, and watched I'd learned not to rush him. You ready? I asked. He shook his head no. Then after a breath nodded. Yes. I left the engine running for a moment just for the warmth, then turned it off. The quiet settled around us, thick and immediate, only broken by the muffled hum of the Christmas song from inside the house. Okay, I whispered more to myself than him. We've got this. He opened his door and stepped out, boots crunching in the snow. His breath came out in little white puffs as he looked around. Mom, is that? The front door flew open before he could finish. My mother's silhouette appeared in the frame, outlined by golden light from the hallway. I could almost smell the combination of turkey cinnamon and her expensive perfume from where I stood. Lily, honey, you made it! She called, voice bright and performative like she was greeting an audience. I walked up the steps with Ethan at my side, his gloved hand brushing against mine, searching. I took his hand, squeezing once. His fingers were cold through the knit fabric. Mom leaned in and kissed the air next to my cheek, her lips never actually touching skin. Then she stepped back, eyes already moving past me. "And there's Ethan," she said like she'd just noticed a package the mailman had accidentally dropped off. "Hi there." "Hi, Grandma," Ethan said quietly. She gave him a quick pat on the shoulder, like touching something she didn't quite know how to hold, and then turned back into the house. "Come in. Come in, you're letting all the warm air out," she added over her shoulder. I guided Ethan inside. The warmth hit us immediately, along with the smell of roasting meat and sugar cookies and scented candles working overtime. The living room was a full frontal assault of Christmas giant tree ornaments, perfectly spaced, garlands wrapped around the banister, a fireplace crackling with what I knew were gas logs made to look like real wood. And in the middle of it all stood my father, glass of something amber in hand, wearing an ugly Christmas sweater, ironic enough to be cool on someone else, but somehow just looked smug on him. "There's my girl," he said, crossing the room in a few strides. He kissed my cheek quickly, then glanced down at Ethan. "Hey, champ." He clapped Ethan once on the back. Not a hug, not really. More like a tap to confirm that yes, the boy existed. "Hi, Grandpa," Ethan mumbled. My sister's voice bubbled up from the kitchen before I could answer. "Lily, you're here." Amanda swept into the room, all glossy hair and perfect makeup, wearing a red dress that somehow managed to be both festive and appropriately modest for Mom's standards. She looked like the personification of a Christmas commercial, the one where everyone's happy because they purchased the right brand of joy. She hugged me warm and fragrant. "Oh my God, it's been forever. Traffic okay? You look tired." Translation: "You look worse than I do." "Yeah. Well, single mom life," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Sleep is a myth." Amanda laughed like I'd told a joke. "Where's my little man?" she cooed, crouching down to Ethan's level. "Hey you ready for Santa?" Ethan shifted from foot to foot, eyes darting between her and the tree, I guess he said. Guess Amanda grinned. "Come on, Sophie is beside herself." As if on cue, her daughter came bouncing into the room. Sophie was 8, same age as Ethan, but somehow she looked brighter. Or maybe that was just the effect of the twinkling lights and the new sparkly dress she wore. "Auntie Lily!" Sophie shrieked, throwing her arms around my waist. "Mom, can we show them now? Please?" My mother appeared again from the kitchen, dabbing her hands on a towel. "Not yet, sweetheart. We have to wait for everyone to settle." But soon, she glanced at me with a conspiratorial smile. "We have a little surprise for this one tonight," she said, tilting her head toward Sophie. "Little right." Ethan watched Sophie with the kind of cautious interest he had for all other children. He wanted to be close, but he never quite knew how. "Want to see my new dress?" Sophie asked him, spinning around, so the skirt flared. "It's nice," Ethan said. "You don't have a Christmas outfit?" she asked, genuinely puzzled, like the concept was unheard of. Ethan looked down at his sweater, the one he'd chosen himself, blue with a pixelated snowman on it. He'd been so excited about it this morning. "This is my Christmas sweater," he said a little defensively. "Oh," Sophie said. Then she shrugged and ran back toward the kitchen. "Grandma, is it time yet?" I exhaled slowly. Just a night, just get through the night. Dinner was the usual choreography of my family's hierarchy. Dad at the head of the table, Mom at the other end, Amanda at Dad's right. Me at the far left, almost closer to the kitchen than to the center of conversation. The kids were wedged between adults like afterthoughts. Ethan sat beside me, his shoulders already around his ears, his fingers digging crescents into his napkin. The noise level climbed steadily as everyone started passing dishes, talking over one another, laughing too loudly at Dad's jokes. "Ethan, sweetie," Mom said at one point, "use your fork properly, like your cousin." He stiffened, adjusting his grip. "He's fine, Mom," I said quietly. "Well, he's 8, not 2. She replied under her breath, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "By that age, you girls already knew how to behave at the table." The old familiar sting flared in my chest. I wanted to say, "By that age, you'd already taught me that being quiet was more important than being okay." But I didn't. I just took a sip of my wine and let the acidity distract me. "So, Lily," Dad said a little later, carving into the turkey, "how's Work. Still doing that blog thing? He said blog thing like mood ring, a teenage fad, nothing more. I swallowed my bite of mashed potato. Yeah. I mean, I still do some freelance writing, and the mental health blog is growing. We got invited to collaborate with a nonprofit last month. Oh, so it's not a real job yet? Amanda said, smiling sweetly. I felt Ethan's eyes on me. I pay my bills. I said I pay Ethan's therapy bills. That feels pretty real. The table quieted for half a second. Mom shifted in her chair. Honestly, Lily, if you didn't talk so much about his issues, she said, keeping her voice low, he might not have so many. I laughed once. A sharp, humorless sound. That's not how anxiety works, Mom. Dad waved his knife a little as if slicing through tension. Let's not get into all that on Christmas. We're here to celebrate. Celebrate what I wanted to ask. That my child is invisible in his own family. Instead, I forced a smile for Ethan, who was now staring determinedly at his plate, his appetite gone. After dinner, Mom clapped her hands, the signal for the next act in the holiday performance. Okay, everyone. Coats and boots, she sang. It's time. Sophie squealed and bounced in her chair. Is it my surprise? Is it? You'll see, Dad said, eyes crinkling at the corners with pride. We all bundled up again. Hats and scarves and gloves pulled on. The shift from the warm, stuffy house to the crisp outside air was almost a relief. My breath came out in clouds, mingling with everyone else's as we filed into the yard. The tarp stood in the middle of the lawn, eerily lump-like under the floodlights. The green fabric flapped a little in the wind, the giant red bow on top, glossy and ridiculous. Sophie ran to stand right in front of it. Can I open it? Please, she begged. Dad laughed, that big, booming laugh he always used when he was sure he was about to be the hero of the story. Of course, kiddo, but let's all gather around first. We formed a loose half-circle, boots pressed into the snow. Ethan stood by my side, half a step back, his gloved hand slipping into mine. His palm was sweaty, even in the cold. Mom, he whispered, do you think maybe it's something we can all use together, like a sled or something? My throat tightened. Maybe I lied. Whatever it is, we'll handle it. Okay. All right, Dad called, ready. He grabbed the edge of the tarp along with Sophie. Mom held her phone up already. Recording Amanda stood nearby. Phone ready too, the angle perfect for posting. 3. Mom counted, her voice bright. 2, 1. They yanked the tarp away in a dramatic flourish. The ATV gleamed under the floodlights like a shiny animal, metallic red with black accents. Big tires, a little seat, just the right size for a spoiled child. The logo on the front practically screamed its brand. Sophie screamed too. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! She ran to it, hands tracing the handlebars. Is it mine? Is it all mine? For our special girl, Dad announced proudly. Merry Christmas, sweetheart, for the most adventurous granddaughter in the world. Mom added, her voice thick with emotion, as she zoomed in on Sophie's ecstatic face. Amanda made a show of being overwhelmed. Mom, Dad, you didn't have to. Oh, nonsense, Mom said. We only get one childhood with her. I looked down at Ethan. He was not smiling. He wasn't crying either. He was completely still, his face blank in that way I'd learned to recognize as danger. His eyes were fixed on the ATV, reflecting its red paint and the white lights, as if he were seeing something I couldn't. I squeezed his hand. He didn't squeeze back. Come on, hop on, Dad urged Sophie. Just for a second. Let's get a picture. Sophie climbed onto the seat, gripping the handles, squealing. Amanda stood next to her, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, the other adjusting her hair. Mom moved around them, capturing every angle. Nana, make sure you get the bow in the background, Sophie said. I am, sweetheart, I am, Mom replied. Lily, get over here, Dad called. You should get a picture with your niece and her new ride. I just shook my head, I'm good. Come on, don't be such a Grinch, Amanda joked. If I was the Grinch, what did that make them? Ethan shifted closer to me, his shoulder pressing into my side. He did that when the world got too loud, leaned into something solid so he wouldn't float away. Hey, buddy, Dad said suddenly, as if remembering he existed. Cool, huh? He gestured to the ATV. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. Yeah, he said softly. Maybe one day you'll get to ride it too. Dad added in the same tone you might use to say, maybe one day you'll visit the moon. Maybe, Ethan replied, but there was no belief in it. I could feel my heart rate picking up my body, preparing for something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. The cold air felt too thin, like I'd inhaled all of it, and there was none left for anyone else. Mom walked over, finally lowering her phone. "Okay, let's go back inside before we all freeze," she said cheerfully. Then she bent towards Sophie. "You can take it for a spin tomorrow when it's not so icy." "Sweetheart, we don't want you getting hurt. Can I show my friends?" Sophie asked. "Can I have them over to ride it too?" "Of course," Amanda said. "We'll make a party of it." No one said Ethan's name in that list of friends. No one looked at him and said, "You too." It was just assumed he wouldn't be part of that particular picture. We filed back inside. Dad and Amanda and Sophie stayed outside a few more minutes taking more photos. I could see them through the window. Little frozen figures in a snow globe I wanted to smash. Once we were in the entryway, Ethan pulled off his gloves, carefully, fingers trembling. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't answer. He walked to the bench, sat down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his hands pressed together like he was trying to hold himself in place. "Ethan." I crouched in front of him. "Talk to me." He swallowed hard. His eyes were shiny, but no tears fell. That was new. When he was younger, big feelings meant big crying. Now at 8, big feelings meant shutting down. "It's just a present," I said quietly. "I know it feels like a big deal, but—" "What did they get me?" he asked, suddenly looking up. The question hit me like a slap. I thought of the small gift bag Mom had handed me when we arrived, a book about mindfulness for kids, a stress ball shaped like a brain. I thought how proud she'd looked when she said, "We thought this could help him." No toy, no game. No simple childlike joy. Just a reminder that he was a project to fix. "They got you some things," I said carefully. "We'll open them later." But like he insisted, they didn't say anything. When they gave Sophie the ATV, they said all that stuff. "Our amazing granddaughter. Our most adventurous girl." He mimicked their voices with painful accuracy. They didn't say anything about me. I heard the muffled sound of laughter from outside Amanda's. Laugh, Dad's laugh. Sophie's delighted shrieks. It all pressed against the windows, against my skull. I took a deep breath. "Ethan, sometimes adults—" "Do they not like me?" he blurted out. There it was. The question I had spent 8 years trying to outrun translated into exact words. What I stalled because the truth wanted to rush out so fast I was afraid it would shatter him. "Of course they—" "Because I have issues," he said, making air quotes with his small fingers in a gesture I recognized all too well. My mother's gesture, borrowed and distorted Grandma's always saying that his issues, his anxiety, like I'm a problem. Sophie's adventurous. But I'm— What? He looked away. Annoying. My eyes burned. I blinked it away. I didn't want him to see me cry. That would just be one more thing for him to worry about. "You are not annoying," I said firmly. "You have anxiety. That just means your brain gets extra loud sometimes, especially when things are unpredictable or overwhelming. That doesn't make you less than anyone. It just makes you— you." "That's what you say," he muttered. "But they don't say stuff like that. They say, 'If he just tried harder,' or, 'In our day, kids didn't have labels, they just grew up.'" I clenched my jaw. I hadn't realized he'd been listening that closely. "You heard that?" I asked softly. He nodded. "And they always talk about Sophie like she's some kind of trophy. Perfect little angel. So brave. So normal." He flinched on that last word I heard Grandma say. "Some of us just get lucky with grandkids." My stomach twisted. I remembered that conversation. In the kitchen when she thought we were in the backyard. I hadn't known Ethan was in the hall. "I don't think they meant it the way—" "You always say that," he interrupted. "They didn't mean it like that." "Maybe they did. Maybe they just don't like me. Maybe they wish I wasn't like this." His voice broke on this. I reached for his hand. He pulled back at first, then let me take it. Fingers limp. I lowered my voice, trying to speak past the lump in my throat. "Listen to me," I said. "If there is one thing in this universe that I am absolutely sure of, it's this. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You are not a mistake. You're 8, Ethan. You're allowed to be scared sometimes. You're allowed to have a brain that gets overwhelmed. Their inability to understand that is their failure, not yours." He watched me, eyes wide and wet. The sounds from outside faded like someone had turned down the volume on the world. "But if I didn't have anxiety," he whispered, "would they have gotten me something big too?" There it was. The bargaining question. The fantasy that if he were different, he'd be worthy. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say, of course they would have. But I thought about all the times they'd already overlooked him, dismissed him, side-eyed him when he covered his ears at fireworks or hid behind me at birthday parties. So instead, I took a shaking breath and said, "I don't know, honey. Maybe? Maybe not? But I know this. You shouldn't have to be someone else to be loved properly." He blinked slowly. It just felt like they were saying, "She's amazing and I'm nothing." A crack formed not in him. He had cracks already, hairline fractures from years of tiny cuts. But in me, something inside me split open and refused to close again. "They're wrong." I said more to myself than to him. "They are so wrong." Footsteps sounded behind us. I turned to see my mother coming down the hall, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "There you two are," she said. "What are you doing hiding back here? We're getting the hot chocolate ready, and we still haven't opened presents from us." She sounded upbeat, slightly impatient, like we were being inconsiderate by not participating in the joy show. "Ethan wasn't feeling great," I said. "We just needed a minute." Mom's eyes flicked to Ethan, taking in his hunched shoulders, his damp lashes. Her mouth tightened. "Oh, sweetheart," she said with that faux gentle tone that always seemed to have a layer of exasperation baked into it. "It's Christmas. Try to enjoy it." "Okay." We went to a lot of trouble. For who I wanted to ask. For Sophie. Ethan stared at the floor. Mom turned back to me. "You know, if you didn't indulge all this so much, he might be more resilient. You were sensitive as a child too, but we nipped that in the bud." "Yeah," I said flatly, "I remember." She rolled her eyes just slightly. "Honestly, Lily, you dramatize everything. It's not that serious. Kids are kids. Sophie just handles things better. You should help him learn from her instead of what I asked. Instead of protecting him. Instead of giving him a mother who doesn't let him be slowly eroded by the people who are supposed to love him." She sighed. "No one is trying to hurt him. You really need to stop seeing everything as an attack." I was suddenly aware of how tired I was. Not physically, though that too, but soul-deep tired. Tired of explaining my son's brain to people who didn't want to understand it. Tired of pretending that little comments didn't matter. Behind us, the front door opened again, and cold air rushed in along with a burst of laughter. "That video is going to get 1,000 likes," Amanda called from the foyer. "She's going to be the coolest kid in school." "Grandpa's girl," Dad replied proudly. "Grandpa's girl, Grandpa's pride. Grandpa's content." Ethan's fingers tightened around mine. "Mom," he whispered so quietly I almost didn't hear. "Can we go home after presents?" I looked at him at the hallway filled with framed photos of my perfect sister's perfect milestones. At the living room where our stockings hung, his always slightly off-center, off-color, off-something. At the kitchen where my parents were laying out mugs and marshmallows and whipped cream, crafting the illusion of warmth. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "We can go home after presents or before or right now if you want." He looked up, startled. "Right now. If you want to," I repeated. He considered this for a second, his brows knitting together. "What about? They'll be mad." I thought about that, about their sighs and their lectures and their disappointment. And for the first time, the fear that had kept me tethered to their approval began to loosen. "If they're mad," I said slowly, "that's their feeling to deal with. Not ours." He stared at me for a moment longer, then shook his head. "We can stay for presents," he said. "I just want to go home after." "Okay," I said, "we'll go home after." I stood up. Mom was still watching us, confusion and annoyance warring in her expression. "Well," she asked, "you coming?" "In a minute," I said, "we'll be there." She shrugged and walked away, already calling out for everyone to gather in the living room. I watched her back recede down the hall, something cold settling into my stomach. Not the sharp ice of panic, but the steady, solid chill of resolve. That was the moment I knew, even if I didn't yet understand the shape of it, this was our last Christmas here. Not because of the ATV itself, though. That would be the symbol everyone remembered. But because of the silence around my son when it appeared. Because of the way their voices rose for Sophie and dimmed for Ethan, like someone sliding a volume control. because of that one question that had hung in the air like frost. If I didn't have problems, would they like me more? I took Ethan's hand and led him down the hallway toward the glow of the Christmas tree, toward the pile of carefully curated presents that had somehow forgotten him. If this was going to be our last performance in their holiday play, I decided then I was done playing my old role. I wasn't going to be the quiet, apologetic daughter anymore. I was done teaching my son that enduring love was the same as earning it. As we stepped into the living room, I plastered on a smile. Not because I believed in the scene, but because I had a new audience in mind now. The audience of one small boy whose eyes were always watching me for cues on how to survive this world. "Come on," I whispered to him, "let's get this over with." He nodded, and together we walked into the light. I didn't draft the breakup email to my parents the night of the ATV. That night, after we opened presents and Ethan carefully unwrapped his Mindfulness for Kids book, and the stress ball brain after I watched him paste on a polite smile and say thank you, like we'd rehearsed, I drove us home through the snow in dead silence. He fell asleep halfway back, head tilted against the window, the faint shape of the stress ball still in his hand. When I carried him up to our apartment, his fingers were clenched so tightly around it that I had to pry them open one by one to slide it free. He didn't wake up when I took off his boots or pulled his sweater over his head. He didn't stir when I tucked him under the comforter. Only when I reached out to turn off his lamp did he mumble something, just one broken sentence. "Don't let them make me feel like that again." My throat closed. "I won't," I whispered. "I promise." I kept that promise badly for a few more weeks before I learned how to keep it well. January. In our town is ugly. The romance of December's first snow is gone, replaced by gray slush and dirty ice piled on the sides of the road like leftover mistakes. Christmas decorations dangle half frozen from gutters. The lights stay up too long, like smiles held past sincerity. Ethan's mood seemed to match the weather. The first week back at school, his teacher emailed me. "Ethan seems more distracted than usual. He's been complaining of stomach aches before recess." The second week, I noticed he was back to picking at the skin around his nails until it bled. "Does your stomach really hurt?" I asked one morning as he stood in the kitchen, hand pressed lightly over his sweatshirt. He shrugged, kinda, like sick hurt or anxious hurt. He hesitated both. That was the thing with him, with us. His body and his brain never got the memo that they were separate departments. "We have Dr. Patel this afternoon," I reminded him. "You can talk to her about it." He nodded, then frowned. "Can I tell her about the ATV?" "If you want," I said. "You can tell her anything." He stared at the cereal bowl in front of him. "I don't want her to think I'm jealous or something." I pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. "Jealousy is a normal feeling," I said. "Humans have feelings. That's part of the package. And if something hurts you, it's okay to say it." He chewed slowly, eyes unfocused. It wasn't about the ATV," he said finally. "It was about everything." It felt like they were putting a big shiny sign over her that said, "We love this one," and then just forgetting to make my sign. His words lodged in my chest. I found myself wondering, not for the first time, what my sign had said when I was his age. Dr. Patel's office was on the third floor of a medical building that always smelled faintly like sanitizer and coffee. The waiting room was painted calming shades of blue and green, with bins of sensory toys and picture books neatly arranged along the walls. The first time we came here, Ethan had sat frozen in the car for 15 minutes before he could bring himself to walk through the sliding doors. Now, weeks into therapy, he walked in on his own. His steps were still cautious, but they were steps. "Hi, Ethan," the receptionist said with a genuine smile. She knew his name without checking the schedule. He'd become a regular. That tiny recognition seemed to relax him. He picked up a squishy toy from the bin and sank into a chair. I filled out a form I'd filled out a dozen times before, circling the same symptoms, writing the same examples. When Dr. Patel opened the door, Ethan stood up immediately. He liked her, I did too. She was in her 40s with warm brown eyes and a habit of listening with her whole body. Leaning and nodding, making you feel like your words were not just sounds, but bricks being built into something. "Hi, Lily," she said to me. "Hi, Ethan, want to come back?" He nodded. "Do you want Mom to come in for the first part?" she asked, as she always did. Ethan glanced at me, then back at her. "No, it's okay," he said. "She can wait." "Okay," Dr. Patel said. We'll talk first, and then I'll bring Mom in at the end, like usual. Sound good? He nodded again. They disappeared into her office, leaving me in the waiting room, with nothing but my phone and my thoughts. I scrolled endlessly to avoid thinking about my parents. It didn't work. Their voices kept pushing through the noise. In our day, kids just toughened up. If you didn't talk about his issues so much, he might not have them. Some of us just get lucky with grandkids. By the time Dr. Patel called me in, my fingernails had left crescents in my palms. Ethan sat in the cushioned chair across from her couch, feet not quite touching the floor. He was holding a fidget toy shaped like a cube, flipping the little switches with steady clicks. Ethan was telling me about your Christmas, Dr. Patel said once I'd settled onto the couch. He said there was a big present for his cousin. I forced my jaw to unclench. Yeah, I said. The ATV. Ethan's shoulders dipped slightly at the word. He described feeling invisible. She continued choosing her words carefully. Like there was a lot of celebration around one child and very little acknowledgement of him. That's accurate, I said, trying not to sound as bitter as I felt. Dr. Patel looked between the two of us. Ethan, she said gently, can you tell Mom what you told me about that night? Using your own words? He hesitated, then took a deep breath. I felt like he stared at his hands like they were looking at a TV and I was behind it, like I was in the same room, but if I talked, it just sounded like the TV was glitching, so they ignored it. I swallowed. And what did you do with that feeling, she asked him. He shrugged. I squeezed her hand. He nodded at me. And then I just tried not to make any noise. Why, she asked. So I wouldn't bother them, he whispered. Something in my chest snapped. I leaned forward. Hey, I said softly, you could never bother me, you hear me? He glanced up at me for a fraction of a second, then looked away. Dr. Patel cleared her throat gently. We talked about something important today, she said. About what we can control and what we can't. Ethan, do you remember? Do you? He nodded. I can't control what they like, he recited, or what presents they give, or if they say nice stuff about me. I can only control what I do and what I believe about myself. And what do we want you to believe about yourself, she prompted. That I'm not wrong, he said. That I'm allowed to be how I am. Exactly, she said. Then she turned to me. I also think we need to look at your environment. Lily, kids like Ethan can feel small slights very deeply. Repeated invalidation or comparison, especially from family, can reinforce his anxiety. It sounds like that's what's happening. My throat tightened. So what do? I asked. Because I can't make my parents different people. No, she agreed. But you can change how often they have access to him, and you can set clearer boundaries about how they talk about him. You've told me that you've tried to explain his diagnosis, that you've asked them to be more understanding. They think therapy is coddling, I said. My dad literally used the phrase back in my day in the middle of a conversation about panic attacks. Dr. Patel gave a small, sympathetic smile. That's unfortunately very common with their generation. But knowing that doesn't reduce the impact on Ethan or on you. The cube in Ethan's hands clicked faster. I wonder, she continued, if we might consider involving them in a session. Sometimes hearing from a professional helps bridge that gap. It doesn't always change minds, but it can clarify expectations. I almost laughed. I could already hear my mother. We don't need a stranger telling us how to raise kids. We're the parents here. I could hear my father. Is this going on my insurance? Still, the idea lodged itself in my brain. If nothing else, it would put everything on record, like calling a witness in front of the court. I can try, I said slowly, but I can't promise they'll agree. That's okay, she said. You inviting them is already a step. And if they decline, that tells us something, doesn't it? It did. It would say loudly and clearly where their priorities were. We left the office with a follow-up appointment scheduled for the next week. On the drive home, Ethan stared out the window, spinning the stress cube between his fingers. You're not going to make me see Grandma and Grandpa at the doctor, right? He asked suddenly. No, I said, not if you don't want to. He exhaled in relief. But why not? I asked gently. Is it just because you don't like them, or? I don't like how I feel when they talk about me, he said, after a pause. I feel like a math problem they're trying to solve, or like a game they're playing wrong and they're mad at the controller. I nodded slowly. What would make it feel safer? If they had to listen to what you and Dr. Patel say he said, and they weren't allowed to say back in our day, even one time. I smiled despite myself. That's a pretty good rule. He thought for a moment. And if they mess up, then we can leave. That, I said, is a rule I can guarantee. I called my mother that night after Ethan was asleep. The phone rang twice before she picked up Lily. Is everything okay with Ethan? She asked immediately, because in her world, any call from me was either about him or about money. He's fine, I said, physically anyway. Well, that's good, she said, but her tone implied she was bracing for a but. But I wanted to talk to you and Dad about something important, I said. About his anxiety and how we all handle it. She sighed. Oh, Lily, if this is about Christmas. It is, I said, and everything around it. Look, his therapist, Dr. Patel, suggested that maybe you and Dad could come in for a joint session so she can explain his diagnosis and we can talk about how to support him better as a family. There was a long pause. A joint session, she repeated finally, as if testing the words for poison. You mean therapy for us? I took a breath. One appointment, I said, to get on the same page, to help you understand what he's dealing with so you don't accidentally make it harder for him. We aren't making it harder, she said sharply. We love him. We're just trying to encourage him to be strong. Mom, he heard you say you got lucky with grandkids about Sophie, I said. He heard you talk about his issues like he's a burden. He knows he didn't get the big Christmas speech that doesn't feel like love to him. It feels like rejection. There was another long silence. I didn't mean it that way, she said eventually, her voice softer. I know, I said. But intention isn't the only thing that matters. Impact does too. That's what Dr. Patel wants to help with. Well, she cleared her throat. I don't know. Your father definitely won't like the idea. The man is 70. He's not going to sit in a little chair and let some stranger psychoanalyze him. It's not about psychoanalyzing him, I said, jaw tightening. It's about Ethan. This is for Ethan. He doesn't need more labels. Lily, she said, slipping into that weary tone that always made me feel 12 years old again. You're making him think there's something wrong with him. He already thinks that, I said quietly. Not because of therapy, because of how the world treats him, because of how you talk about him. That's not fair, she said. You're right, I said. It's not fair. None of this is fair. But I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to try, to show him that he matters enough for you to sit through an uncomfortable hour. She huffed. Let me talk to your father. She hung up before I could say goodbye. They called back the next day on speaker. We've discussed it, Dad announced, as if declaring the results of a family vote I hadn't been invited to. And we've decided that therapy is your thing, Lily. If you want to go, that's your business. But dragging your mother and me into it, it's unnecessary. It's not unnecessary, I said. It would help. I am not going to sit in some office and be told I'm a bad grandfather because the boy is sensitive, he interrupted. I raised 2 daughters. You both turned out fine. Amanda. I thought turned out fine by your standards. I turned out anxious enough to spend 3 years collecting self-help books like holy texts. I'm not saying you're bad grandparents, I said. I'm saying there are things you don't understand. And your refusal to even try to understand is hurting him. We're not refusing to understand, Mom cut in. We just don't believe in pathologizing normal childhood nerves. If he's nervous, he needs exposure, not excuses. I inhaled slowly through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. So your final answer is no. I asked, you won't come. That's right, Dad said. We'll handle things our way. You can handle things yours. His words felt like a line drawn in the sand. Okay, I said. Then I need you to know there will be changes. What kind of changes? Mom asked, suspicious. For one, I said, you don't get to talk about his issues in front of him anymore, or to him, or to other people where he can overhear. If you have questions, you ask me. That's ridiculous, Mom said. We're his grandparents. Yes, I said, and I'm his mother. My job is to protect him even from unintentional harm. Dad made a sound like a scoff. Oh, here we go. And secondly, I said, heart pounding. We're going to be limiting visits for a while until I feel confident that being around you is not making his anxiety worse. The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if the call had dropped. What does that mean? Mom asked, her voice low and dangerous. Limiting visits, are you threatening to keep our grandson away from us? I'm not threatening anything, I said. I'm telling you the boundary. If you can't be supportive or at least neutral about his mental health, then he doesn't need to be in that environment regularly. So we give him a big Christmas and you punish us, Dad snapped. That's what this is. This isn't about the ATV, I said. It's about everything around it. The way you talk about Sophie versus the way you talk about Ethan. The way you dismiss his feelings. The way you refuse to meet him halfway. You're overreacting, Mom said. You always have. Since you were little, turning every slight into a tragedy. There it was. The old script. The accusation that my perception was the problem, not their behavior. I'm not 8 anymore, I said. I'm not going to swallow it and smile. You don't have to agree with me, but you will respect my decisions about my kid, or what Dad challenged. You'll keep him from us. If I have to, I said yes. The words shocked even me with their clarity. This is emotional blackmail, Mom said, voice trembling with indignation. You're using that boy as a pawn. No, I said quietly. I'm finally refusing to let you use him as collateral in your game of denial. Dad exhaled loudly. You know what? If you can't handle bringing him over without turning everything into a therapy session, maybe it's better if you don't bring him for a while, until you calm down. There it was. The sentence disguised as an offhand remark that would become the cornerstone of the decision I'd been inching toward for years. If you can't handle him, he added, don't bring him here. For a second, the room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter to steady myself. Say that again, I said. He hesitated, maybe realizing how it sounded, then repeated slower. If you can't handle him, don't bring him here. It felt like a door slamming shut in my face, but behind it another door creaked open. Okay, I said. My voice was very calm. I won't. Lily Mom started. That's not what he... I heard him, I said. And I'm going to do exactly what you've asked. I won't bring him there for a while. Maybe for a long while. You're being ridiculous, Dad said. We didn't say. You did. I said I have to go. Ethan's homework is waiting. We're not finished with this conversation, Mom snapped. I am, I said, and hung up. My hand was trembling. I set the phone on the counter gently like it might explode. For a minute, I just stood there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of cars passing outside Ethan's muffled footsteps in his room. Then I went to my laptop. The email started as a few bullet points. A list, really. I didn't intend to send it at first. I just needed to see the boundaries in black and white to convince myself I wasn't imagining them. Subject about Ethan and visits. I stared at the blinking cursor, then began to type. Mom, Dad, I'm writing this so there is no confusion about what we talked about on the phone today, and about what Ethan and I need going forward. The words came slowly at first, then faster. I wrote about Ethan's diagnosis, generalized anxiety disorder. I wrote about what that meant not as a label, but as a lens. I wrote about how certain environments made it worse. I wrote about Dr. Patel and her suggestion for a joint session and their refusal. Then I wrote about Christmas. I described the ATV, the speeches about Sophie, the absence of any acknowledgement of Ethan. I described the lucky with grandkids comment and the way they talked about his issues within earshot. I described in measured language the impact those things had on an 8-year-old who was already convinced he was a problem. I didn't accuse, I didn't rant. I just laid out facts like exhibits. Finally, I wrote the boundary. Because of all this, I need to step back from in-person visits for now. Ethan will not be coming over to your house for the foreseeable future. Phone calls and video chats are possible, but only if you avoid talking about his issues in a negative way or comparing him to Sophie. I am still open to you attending a session with Dr. Patel if you change your minds. I believe that could help repair some of this. But until then, my priority is Ethan's mental health. That comes before family traditions, before your comfort, and even before your relationship with him. You told me. If you can't handle him, don't bring him here. I can handle him. I'm just done asking him to handle you. I read the last line 3 times. It felt true. Maybe too sharp. Maybe too final. My fingers hovered over the backspace key. Then I thought about Ethan asking, "Do they not like me?" I thought about his nails bleeding at the cuticles, his stomach aches, his careful silence. I hit send. The email whooshed away, taking a piece of my old life with it. When I closed the laptop, Ethan was standing in the doorway to the kitchen holding his math worksheet. Mom, he asked, "Are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's for Easter?" The question caught me off guard. "We're not sure yet," I said. "We might do something on our own this year." He studied my face because of Christmas, because of a lot of the things I said, but mostly because I want you to feel safe, to not feel like you have to disappear to make other people comfortable. He shuffled his feet. "They're going to be mad," he said. "They already are," I said gently. "But that's okay. What if they don't like you anymore?" he asked. I thought about my mother's likely reaction to the email. My father's anger, the stinging possibility of being cut off, of being labeled the difficult daughter permanently, the guilt, the grief, the fear. Then I thought about the promise I'd whispered over his sleeping head on Christmas Eve. "Don't let them make me feel like that again. I can live with that." I said, "I can't live with you thinking you're less than. Because some adults can't see you clearly." He looked down at his paper, then back up at me. "So, it's like in Dr. Patel's office," he said slowly. "We can't control what they do. We can only control if we go there." I smiled exactly. He nodded. "Okay," he said. "Then, can we dye eggs just us?" My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from anxiety. "Yeah," I said. "We can dye eggs just us. We can make new traditions." He came closer, then surprised me by wrapping his arms around my waist. He wasn't a huge hugger, unless he was scared. This felt different, steady. "Thanks for choosing me," he mumbled into my shirt. I closed my eyes and hugged him back, my cheek resting on his hair. "Always," I said. Outside, January's gray sky pressed low over the street. Inside in our small kitchen, something like spring cracked open between us, fragile, tentative, but real. I didn't know yet that my email would sit in my parents' inbox for 2 full days without a response. I didn't know that when they finally answered their reply, would accuse me of manipulation, of drama, of poisoning Ethan against them. I didn't know that friends and relatives would eventually choose sides, that whispers would start at church and at the country club. All I knew in that moment was that I had taken one step away from a house that had never really felt like home, and one step closer to building one where my son could exist without apologizing for it. The cut wasn't clean. It never is when you sever yourself from the people who raised you. But as I stood there with Ethan's arms around me, I realized something. Sometimes cutting is not about ending love. It's about ending access to harm. And that, I decided, was a kind of mercy for him, for me. Maybe even eventually for them. I didn't wake up the next morning feeling powerful or liberated, or any of the other adjectives the internet likes to attach to boundary setting. I woke up with a headache, the kind that settles right behind your eyes, like all your uncried tears turned into little rocks overnight and lodged themselves there. For the first few days after I sent the email, nothing happened. No reply, no call, no angry text, just silence. The same old silence, but heavier now because this time I'd chosen it. "Maybe they didn't see it," Ethan said on the second day when I opened my inbox for the 20th time and still saw nothing. "They saw it," I said, staring at the sent folder. "Trust me." How, he asked. "Because your grandmother reads her email like other people read the Bible." I said word for word multiple times a day, mostly to find things she disagrees with. He snorted, then quickly smoothed his face out like laughing at them was somehow disloyal. On the third day, a reply finally arrived. I read it once, then, once again, slower to make sure I wasn't exaggerating its cruelty in my head. "We are deeply hurt by your accusations. We have done nothing but love you and Ethan in the best way we know how. You are twisting innocent actions into some narrative of abuse because you seem to need a villain in your story. We will not participate in therapy sessions where we are ganged up on. If you want to isolate Ethan from his family and turn him against us, that will be something you have to explain to him when he is older. We will always be here when you come to your senses. Until then, we will be taking a step back." A step back, as if they were the ones making the noble sacrifice. I didn't forward the email to Dr. Patel, but I thought about it. I could practically hear her voice in my head anyway. "This confirms exactly what we talked about." Ethan was in the living room when the email came, sprawled on the rug, with his Legos building something that looked halfway between a spaceship and a castle. "Did they write back?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "What did they say?" I hesitated. He was 8. I wanted to protect him from their words, but he was also the most affected party in all of this. Leaving him completely out of it felt wrong. "They're upset," I said carefully. "They think I'm overreacting. They don't agree with the boundaries. They aren't ready to change how they behave." He picked at a Lego piece, thumb rubbing along a corner. "So does that mean we're still not going there?" "It means," I said slowly, "that nothing has changed in a good way. So yeah, we're still not going there." He nodded once. Okay, he said. Just okay, no drama, no tears, just acceptance. You're not sad, I asked. He shrugged. A little, he admitted, but also not as stomach achy. I blinked, not as stomach achy, I repeated. When we went there, my stomach always hurt, he said. Like I swallowed a snowball and it wouldn't melt. Now it only hurts sometimes. He said it like a weather report, factual, detached. Something in me eased just a fraction. Then we'll keep it that way, I said. Easter came and went without pastel dresses, without the giant egg hunt at my parents' country club, without the obligatory family photo in front of their blooming azaleas. We dyed eggs at the kitchen table instead, just the two of us. I'd bought the cheap dye kit from the grocery store, the kind with flimsy wire dippers and tablets that fizzed in vinegar. Ethan watched the colors bloom in the cups like something magical. This is actually more fun, he said, carefully lowering an egg into the blue cup, because we don't have to rush. He was right. There was no timetable, no hurry up, the cousins are waiting, no photo schedule to meet. We experimented with rubber bands and wax crayons, making patterns, layering colors. His fingers got stained green and purple. Mine turned a weird shade of gray-blue. When we were done, we lined the eggs up on a dish towel to dry. Some were genuinely pretty. Some were cracked. All of them were ours. Can we do this every year, he asked. We can do this as many years as you want, I said. He smiled, small but real. For a second, I let myself imagine a line of future Easters just like this. Small, simple, quiet, just us. The first PTA meeting I went to after Christmas, I noticed something I'd never really paid attention to before, the way parents talked about their kids like products. My son made the honor roll. Again, one woman beamed. We're thinking gifted program, maybe even private school. I mean, why not push them if they can handle it? Another chimed in. We just got Sophie a new laptop. She's so advanced with technology, kids these days, right? I looked around the circle of plastic chairs at the proud faces, the nodding heads, the subtle posture shifts of one-upmanship. When it was my turn to introduce myself, I almost said, "Hi, I'm Lily. My son has anxiety, and we're learning how to function in a world that treats calm as compliance." Instead, I said, "Hi, I'm Lily. My son is in 3rd grade. I write." Oh, someone asked politely, "What do you write?" I hesitated. For a long time, my answer had been murky. A little freelance, a little copywriting. A lot of half-finished essays in Google Docs writing used to be my private outlet, not my job. Mostly about mental health and parenting. I said I have a blog. The woman across from me, curly hair, tired eyes, name tag that said Jess, perked up. Oh, what's it called? She asked. Nervous system. I said, cheeks warming. It's small. Mostly just me and a few people on Facebook who accidentally clicked the link. She laughed. I liked the name. After the meeting, Jess caught up with me in the hallway. So she said, lowering her voice, mental health and parenting. Huh. Do you write about kids with anxiety? I studied her face more closely. The tiredness there wasn't just from lack of sleep. It was the drained look of someone who'd been holding something too heavy for too long. Yeah, I said, that's kind of the main subject. She let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. I need that, she said simply. My daughter, she has panic attacks. The school thinks she's dramatic. My parents think I'm spoiling her. I feel like I'm stuck between everyone's opinions and my kid's actual breathing. We ended up standing in that hallway for half an hour trading stories. About school nurses who suggested toughening up, about relatives who rolled their eyes at therapy, about the way you could feel judged from every direction no matter what you did. By the time we exchanged numbers, something had shifted in me. For the first time, I didn't feel like the only person in the room trying to translate their child to the world. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I opened my laptop, clicked on my blog dashboard, and started a new post. Title: The Christmas Where My Kid Got a Stress Ball and a Stomachache. My fingers hovered over the keys. I knew if I wrote this the way it happened, ATV and all, anyone in my family who stumbled upon it would recognize themselves. I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet, so I did what writers have always done. I turned my real life into a story, dressed in different clothes. I changed the ATV to a dirt bike. I moved the setting to a relative's house. States away. I turned 2 grandparents into a vague set of older relatives, but I kept the core intact. I wrote about the big, shiny gift, the speeches about bravery and normalcy, the child on the sidelines whose presents were tools for self-improvement. I wrote about the way comparison cut deeper than any lack of material things. I wrote about my son, asking if without anxiety, he would have been loved better. I didn't name him, I called him my kid. When I hit publish, my heart pounded like I'd just confessed a crime. By morning, the post had 3 comments, more than most I'd written. By the end of the week, it had over 100. Some were short, "This I feel this so hard." Others were long, full stories from strangers. My son has ADHD, and last year his cousin got a trip to Disney, and he got a book about focus. Your article made me feel less crazy for being hurt by that. We have the same dynamic with my niece. She can do no wrong. My kid with sensory issues is always too much. Thank you for putting words to it. I read each comment like a prayer. I wasn't alone. Ethan wasn't an anomaly. There were hundreds, probably thousands of kids like him, and parents like me trying to navigate a world that sorted children into easy categories and left the difficult ones in the returns pile. I started writing more, not because I had a grand plan, but because once I cracked the door open, the stories pushed through. I wrote about the first time Ethan had a panic attack at Target and the way everyone stared at him like he was misbehaving instead of drowning. I wrote about the teacher who quietly added a calm corner to her classroom after I told her about his anxiety. I wrote about my own childhood, carefully anonymized with details scrubbed, and how I'd learned to be small to make other people comfortable. I didn't write about my parents by name, but their ghosts were everywhere in my sentences. The blog grew slowly at first, then faster. A parenting group shared one post. A mental health organization shared another. Someone from a small online magazine emailed asking if I'd like to cross-post. It wasn't viral fame. There were no book deals or morning show invitations, but there was momentum. A steady trickle of people saying, "Me too." I started getting emails directly, subject lines like, "Thank you for seeing my kid, and I thought I was just a bad mom," and "Do you ever feel guilty cutting off family?" That last one hooked me by the throat. The woman who wrote it had a 10-year-old with OCD. Her in-laws called it attention-seeking. They would hide his comfort objects to teach him a lesson. When she finally stopped visiting, they told everyone she was alienating the grandkids. Reading her story was like standing in front of a distorted mirror. "Not exactly me, but close enough," I wrote back. I told her about Ethan's stomach aches about our last Christmas with my parents, about the email I wrote, the sentences I needed someone to write to me. "You are not crazy for protecting your child from people who won't protect them. You are not cruel for limiting access. You are not obligated to sacrifice your kid's mental health for someone else's idea of family." I hit send and realized with a jolt that in trying to help her, I'd accidentally told the truth to myself. With less time spent prepping for performances at my parents' house, no more carefully chosen outfits that would pass my mother's inspection, no more rehearsing how to minimize Ethan's differences, we had more time for nothing, boring precious nothing. We took slow walks after dinner just around the block. Sometimes Ethan talked about school, the kid who pushed him in line, the book he liked, the new math game. Sometimes he just kicked at rocks and listened to the crunch of gravel. His stomach aches didn't vanish, but they lessened. The skin around his nails began to heal pink and tender. He still had bad days, mornings when he couldn't make himself walk into the building nights, when his brain latched onto some worry like a dog with a bone. But there was a new baseline. One afternoon, his teacher, Ms. Ramos, pulled me aside at pickup. "I've noticed a change in Ethan," she said. "He's raising his hand more. He volunteered to read in front of the class yesterday." "He did?" I asked, genuinely shocked. She smiled. "He was shaking like a leaf, but he did it." And then he looked at me afterward, like he couldn't believe it himself. I felt something swell in my chest. Pride, yes, but also gratitude. That he had spaces where risk didn't mean humiliation. "We've been working on some things in therapy," I said, "and we made some changes with family. Less pressure, maybe." "Well," she said, "whatever you're doing, keep doing it. He's a thoughtful kid, really kind." The other day, when one of the boys dropped his tray in the cafeteria and everyone laughed, Ethan was the one who helped him pick everything up. My throat tightened. Of course he was. At home that night, I asked him about it. He shrugged, embarrassed. "I just didn't like the way his face looked," he said. "Like mine at Christmas." His ability to link his own pain to others still stunned me. "Hey, Ethan," I asked, "do you remember how you felt the night of the ATV?" He winced at the word even now. "Yeah," he said. "Do you still feel like that?" "All the time?" I asked. "Or is it different now?" He thought for a long moment. "Sometimes I still feel like people don't see me," he said slowly. but not as much because you do. The simplicity of it almost knocked me over. He didn't need everyone to understand him. He needed enough people, the right people, to see him and stay. With each post I wrote, each email I answered, each late-night conversation I had with Ethan, in the dark of his room, the shape of something began to emerge. I didn't call it revenge, not yet. At that point, it felt more like reclamation. Every time I turned our pain into words, I was pulling a little bit of power back from the people and systems that had made him feel defective. I was shifting the narrative from grandparents denied access to grandson by ungrateful daughter to mother chooses child over tradition. The more I wrote, the more I realized how many stories were like ours. Not identical, but running along the same fault lines between old beliefs and new science, between image and reality, between family loyalty and personal safety. One evening, an email popped up from a local community center. We've seen your blog, and we're wondering if you'd be interested in facilitating a small support group for parents of kids with anxiety or other mental health concerns. Nothing fancy, just a space to talk. My immediate reaction was to laugh out loud. Me facilitate. I was barely holding my own life together. But then I thought of Jess in the PTA hallway. I thought of the woman who'd emailed about her in-laws. I thought of the version of me from 3 years earlier, Googling, is my kid broken, or is it just anxiety at 2 a.m.? Maybe I wasn't an expert, but I was further along the path than some. I wrote back, I'm not a therapist, but I'm a mom who's been in the trenches. If that's what you're looking for, I'd love to try. The first meeting, only 4 parents showed up. We sat in a circle of mismatched chairs in a room that smelled faintly of crayons and disinfectant. No one knew where to start, so I told a story. The Target panic attack, complete with the sympathetic looks and the glares, and the cashier who whispered, "Hang in there, Mom." When I finished, the dad next to me, big guy, construction boots, calloused hands, cleared his throat. "My boy can't do birthday parties," he said. "Too loud. My mother says he's rude." I told her if she says that again, she won't see him for a while. My heart did a strange flip. "What did she say?" I asked. He smiled grimly. "She said I was being dramatic." I said, "Maybe, but he's my kid." "Did you mean it?" I asked. He looked at his hands. "I did when I said it," he admitted. But then I felt guilty. Like I was taking something away from her. Maybe that's why I'm here. We all laughed, a tired, knowing laugh. As the weeks went by, more parents came. Sometimes we cried. Sometimes we swapped practical tips, the name of a good therapist, a script for talking to teachers, a way to explain panic to a 7-year-old. We were strangers mostly. We didn't know each other's last names or jobs or histories, but we knew the important thing. We shared the experience of loving a kid the world considered too much. After one meeting, as I was stacking chairs, Jess came up to me. "You know this is something, right?" she said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "This group. Your blog. All of it. It's not just venting. People are changing how they think because of you." I shook my head. "I'm just writing about my screw-ups." "Yeah," she said. "And in doing that, you're giving the rest of us permission to not be perfect either." That's huge. I didn't know what to say. Compliments always slid off me like water. Years of being told I was too dramatic had made me suspicious of anything that smelled like praise. Besides, she added, "Doesn't it feel a little satisfying? Knowing that while your parents are probably still bragging about the ATV to their country club friends, you're quietly building something that actually helps people." I laughed, startled by the image. I pictured my parents in their world of golf and charity balls, telling the story of the Christmas they went all out for their granddaughter. I pictured the polite nods, the envy, the admiration. Such devoted grandparents. Then I pictured this room, mismatched chairs, stained carpet, parents clutching paper cups of bad coffee as they poured out their fears. Whose story mattered more? "It does," I admitted. "It feels more like justice than vengeance, though." Jess shrugged. "Sometimes those are the same thing," she said, "or at least cousins." That night after Ethan went to bed, I sat down at my laptop again. I opened a blank document, not the blog platform this time, but something more private. At the top, I typed, "Project Building a World. My kid can breathe in." I didn't know exactly what the project would become. A book, a bigger group, a guide for teachers, a curriculum. I just knew I wasn't done. As the cursor blinked, waiting, I thought about my parents, about the ATV, about the line that had formed between us sharp and clear. I realized that without meaning to, I'd already started the most effective form of revenge there is, living a life where their power to define me, and him, shrank a little more every day. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic. There were no screaming matches in parking lots, no slammed doors, no viral videos, just a slow, steady shifting of allegiance, away from my fear of disappointing them, toward my responsibility to protect him. Chapter 2 had ended with an email and an unanswered phone. Chapter 3 I decided would be about everything that grew in the space their silence left behind. I started to type. The first time I saw my parents' faces again, they were on my TV. They weren't the stars of the show, obviously. The camera only caught them for a second, a quick cutaway to the audience, but I'd know those profiles anywhere. My father's sharp jaw, my mother's carefully composed expression that passed for warmth in public. They were sitting in the second row of a town hall meeting about youth mental health, nodding along as the moderator introduced the panelists. And there, standing at the podium in a too-big blazer, hands gripping the sides like a life raft, was Ethan, 15 years old. My son. He cleared his throat, and the microphone picked it up, a soft crackle of nerves. "My name is Ethan," he said, voice steadier than I felt. "I have generalized anxiety disorder. That's not something I'm ashamed of anymore." I sank down onto the couch, remote forgotten in my hand. I'd known the local news station was airing the panel. I'd given them permission, signed the forms. I'd been there, in the room that night off to the side, just out of the camera's main frame. But somehow seeing it replayed with graphics and smooth transitions and the serious news anchor voiceover made it feel less like my life and more like a story about someone else. On screen, the camera cut briefly to the moderator, then back to Ethan. "When I was little," he continued, "I used to think I was broken because I'd get scared in situations where other kids were fine. I thought there was something wrong with me and that everyone could see it and was just too polite to say it." He paused, looked down at his notes, then back up. "What helped was having adults who believed me when I said I was anxious, who didn't say you're overreacting or it's not that bad, but said, okay, what do you need?" That changed everything for me. The camera cut again. That's when my parents appeared. Mom dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue. Dad's mouth was set in solemn approval. If I hadn't lived the last 7 years, I might have been touched. Instead, I felt something like vertigo. They looked proud. They looked moved. They looked exactly like the kind of grandparents who would say, "We believed in him all along." The segment ended with a shot of the panel, the audience clapping. The anchor came back on, talking about brave teens and ending the stigma. I muted the TV and sat there, heart pounding. They were there. Of course they were. It was a public event held at the same community center where I ran my group. It had been advertised in the paper, anyone could attend. But I'd gotten there early through the back entrance, slipping in with Ethan and the other teen panelists. I'd sat near the side in the shadows. I hadn't scanned the audience closely. I hadn't wanted to get distracted by whether or not someone from my past might be there. Now I knew. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. My phone dinged with the text before the replay even ended. From Amanda. "Just saw Ethan on TV." 3 exclamation marks. I stared at them. A minute later, another text. "Mom is crying. She says she's so proud of him. They're all talking about how brave he is." I exhaled, a sound halfway between a laugh and a groan. Of course they were. 10 minutes later, my phone rang, Mom and Dad on the screen. Ethan was still in his room doing whatever teenage boys did behind closed doors, with the sound of a YouTube video faintly leaking out. I considered letting the call go to voicemail. Then I answered. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Lily." My mother exclaimed, her voice breathless in a way I recognized as performative excitement. "We just saw Ethan on the news." "On the news." My father's voice chimed in from the background. "That boy can speak," he said a little wonderingly, as if his ability to string coherent sentences together under pressure was a revelation. "Yeah," I said, "he's been working hard." "It was incredible," Mom continued. "He was so poised, so mature, talking about his condition like that. So brave." I sat down at the kitchen table so I wouldn't pace. "He did great," I agreed. "We're really proud of him." "We were there, you know," Dad said. "At the center. We saw it live. We had to leave before we could say hello. It was such a crowd, but we just We wanted to tell you how amazing he was. There it was, the narrative forming in real time. The loving grandparents, so proud. The unspoken suggestion, see, we're supportive. We've always been supportive. That's nice, I said carefully. He didn't see you. A pause. Well, we were toward the back, Mom said quickly. We didn't want to distract him. We thought it was important he focus. Sure that. We've been reading your blog too, she added. Some of the things you've written, very powerful. A bit exaggerated at times. She gave a brittle laugh, but clearly it's resonating with people. My pulse ticked up so they'd finally found it or admitted they had. I'm glad it's helping people, I said. There was a rustling sound and then my father's voice again, adopting his serious business tone. Listen, he said. Your mother and I have been talking. We know there were misunderstandings in the past. Emotions ran high. But watching Ethan up there doing something so important, it's made us realize. He trailed off, searching for the right words. We want to be part of this. Of his journey. I almost choked. Part of his journey, I repeated. Yes, Mom said, taking over. We're actually organizing a fundraiser at the club for youth mental health. Isn't that something? We talked to the board and they're very enthusiastic. It'll be a big event. Silent auction dinner, the whole 9 yards. We'd love for Ethan to speak. Maybe share what he shared on TV, plus a little more. Raise awareness, you know. I closed my eyes. There it was, the reason for the call. It wasn't just about being proud, it was about opportunity. Ethan had done something visible, something respectable. Suddenly, his anxiety wasn't a private issue to be fixed quietly. It was a public cause they could rally around. A way to pivot from ignoring the anxious kid to championing mental health. Think of the impact, Dad said. All those people hearing directly from him and seeing us as a family standing together. It sends a message. It did send a message. Just not the one they thought. And Mom added a little too casually, it wouldn't hurt for your blog either. We could mention it in the program. Keynote Youth Speaker's mother runs a popular mental health blog. You never know who might be in the audience. I felt like I was watching the conversation from outside my body. For years, they dismissed my writing as that blog thing. Now, because it could look good on a glossy event program, it suddenly mattered. What exactly are you asking? I said. We'd like Ethan to be our guest of honor, Dad said. You too, of course, but he'd give the youth perspective. We'll build the whole fundraiser around this theme. Brave hearts supporting youth mental health. We even thought maybe some of the money raised could go to that community center. You're always talking about win-win, right? Win-win. I tasted the phrase bitter on my tongue. Win for them. Public redemption. The ability to rebrand themselves as enlightened, evolved grandparents. Win for me and Ethan. What exactly? A nice meal and a couple of mentions on a program. I thought of the nights Ethan had woken up shaking, convinced he'd done something wrong just by existing. I thought of the time my father had said, if you can't handle him, don't bring him here. I thought of the Christmas ATV gleaming under the lights. Lily, Mom prodded, are you there? I'm here, I said. I just need to think about it and talk to Ethan. It's his story, not mine. Of course, Dad said, of course. Take your time. The event is in 6 weeks, but the sooner we know, the better we can plan. I could hear them already mentally drafting the invitations. We hung up with polite goodbyes, the kind we used to have before everything cracked open. The whole conversation had a surreal, glossy quality to it, like a commercial for reconciliation. Ethan appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, earbuds dangling. Who was that? He asked. Your grandparents, I said. He froze. What did they want? I told him as neutrally as I could. The fundraiser, the speech, the theme, the brave hearts. He listened, face unreadable. And they want me to speak, he confirmed. Yes, I said, at their club, in front of their friends and donors. He snorted, because now I'm, useful? I hesitated. I think they see it as you being inspiring, I said carefully. Yeah, he said, inspiring content. He said content like a curse word. You don't have to do it, I added quickly. We can say no. I wanted you to know it's an option, not an obligation. He leaned against the doorframe thinking. Would it help other kids? He asked finally. What do you mean? I asked. Like he said, picking at a hangnail. If there are rich people there who don't get it, and they hear someone like me talk, would they maybe donate money or something? To schools or centers, help kids whose parents don't take them to therapy. It occurred to me that I had underestimated once again just how much he'd absorbed from my world. It could, I said slowly. I can't promise. But events like that sometimes raise a lot of money. If it's directed to the right places, yeah, it could help. He chewed his lip. And you'd be there on the stage or somewhere I can see you. Front row, I said, if you want me there. I always want you there, he said quickly, then shrugged like he was embarrassed by his own sincerity. I mean, yeah, I think I want to do it, but I prompted, but I don't want to pretend, he said, like everything was always great, like they were always Braveheart grandparents of the year or something. I don't want to lie. Something hot and fierce bloomed in my chest. You're not going to lie, I said. We're not going to let them use you to rewrite history. How, he asked, like, what does that even look like? I didn't answer right away, because in that moment, for the first time, I saw it. The shape of something that had been forming in the background for years. Not a screaming match, not a viral call-out. Something quieter, more devastating. The truth spoken into a microphone they had provided. I don't know yet, I said. But we'll figure it out together. The next 6 weeks were a strange rehearsal of 2 different plays. In one, there was the version my parents clearly envisioned, the proud grandparents hosting a glitzy event, their anxious grandson. Now a shining example of resilience, their daughter. The advocate standing beside them, as evidence of familial harmony. In the other, there was the version Ethan and I were slowly building, a speech that told the truth without naming names, that used the story of one boy and one family to shine a light on a pattern bigger than us. I met with the community center director, Lauren, in her cramped office that still smelled like finger paint. They asked to donate part of the proceeds to us, she said, eyebrows raised. That's unexpected. Strings attached, I asked. She shrugged. They said they wanted Ethan to speak, and maybe you, to say a few words. I vaguely remember your parents, from when we applied for a grant a few years ago. They turned us down. Said mental health wasn't really their demographic. So this is, a shift. Win-win, I said dryly. She studied my face. How do you feel about it? Conflicted, I said. On one hand, I hate the idea of them using Ethan to polish their image. On the other, the money could fund another therapist or expand our teen group. Lauren leaned back, folding her arms. I can't tell you what to do, she said. But I can say this. I've seen a lot of fundraisers. Most of them are about the donors feeling good, not the recipients. If some guilt money comes our way, I'm not too proud to take it, as long as it actually helps the kids. I exhaled. So we take their money, I said, and we tell the truth while we do it. She smiled slowly. Now that she said sounds like justice. We worked on Ethan's speech with Dr. Patel too. Her office couch had seen us through meltdown days and breakthrough days. Now it was seeing us through something else. Preparation. What's the core message you want people to take away? She asked him, pen resting against her notebook. He thought for a long time. That adults can hurt kids without meaning to, he said finally. Especially family. And that we meant well doesn't undo it. She nodded. That's powerful. Can you say that in a way that feels safe for you? Without putting yourself in a position where you'll feel too exposed. He took a breath, I can say. When I was younger, some adults in my life thought pushing me would make me stronger, but it just made me scared. They thought ignoring my feelings would teach me to toughen up. It just taught me that my feelings didn't matter. How would you end it, she asked. By saying, if you really love the kids in your life, you have to love the actual kid, not the one you wish you had, he said. And if you don't understand their brain, you should learn, even if it's uncomfortable. Especially if it's uncomfortable. My eyes burned. I blinked hard, looking at the ceiling. Dr. Patel glanced at me and gave a small nod. Good, she said to Ethan. Really good? As for me, I was supposed to give a short introduction. At least that's how my mother phrased it in the email detailing the event schedule. 700. Welcome and cocktails. 7:30. Opening remarks. Dad. 740. Brief intro by Lily sharing about her blog and work. 750. Ethan's speech. 8:05. Video montage. 8:15. Dinner. The video, she explained, would be a touching compilation of images of kids and families showing the importance of support. She attached a draft of her own remarks. Words like always known, unconditional love, from the moment we first realized Ethan faced challenges we were determined to be there for him. I read them and felt physically ill. They're writing themselves into the story as heroes, I told Jess over coffee. They're going to stand up there and act like they've always been champions of mental health, and everyone will believe them. That's what money does. It buys you a new narrative. So buy one back, she said. How I asked Crash the Party stand up and go, actually, that's not how it went. I'd look unhinged. No one listens to the angry daughter. They'd just say I'm bitter. She stirred her coffee slowly. Don't go after them, she said. Go after the pattern. Tell your story in a way that makes it impossible for people to just clap and move on. You think they'll still want me to speak if I don't stick to the script, I asked. She smiled. They don't control you anymore, remember? That night, I opened a new document and started writing my short intro. It wasn't long. It didn't name names, but every sentence hummed with things I'd never been allowed to say in that country club before. On the day of the event, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the dress I'd rented. It was simple, dark blue with sleeves long enough to make me feel less exposed. I put on makeup with a practiced hand I hadn't used much in years. Ethan appeared behind me in the reflection, tugging at his tie. Do I look like a penguin, he asked. A very handsome penguin, I said. A penguin who's about to make a room full of adults rethink their life choices. He rolled his eyes, but a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Are you nervous, he asked. Terrified, I said honestly. You? He nodded. Yeah, but also kind of ready. Dr. Patel had taught him to name his emotions with precision. Tonight I realized I needed to do the same. I'm scared, I said, but I'm also done. Done pretending. Done editing myself to make other people comfortable. He regarded me quietly. Is this revenge, he asked. I considered the question. Not exactly. I said revenge would be trying to hurt them. This is telling the truth. In a room where the truth usually doesn't fit the dress code. He snorted. You should say that in your speech. Maybe I will, I said. At the club, the air smelled like perfume and money and nostalgia. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light onto white tablecloths. People in evening wear milled around glasses of champagne in hand. Charity auction items displayed like bait along one wall. My parents greeted us at the entrance, all smiles. Lily, Mom said, air kissing my cheek. You look beautiful. You too, I said, because muscle memory is hard to break. Dad clapped Ethan on the shoulder. There's our young man, he boomed. Ready to knock 'em dead. Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm ready to speak, he said. Not kill anyone. Dad laughed like he'd made a great joke. Figure of speech, son. Figure of speech. We took our seats at the head table. I recognized some faces. Old family friends, acquaintances from school people who'd watched me grow up and always asked, so what are you doing these days, with a hint of skepticism? A banner hung behind the podium. Brave Hearts, an evening for youth, mental health. Underneath, in smaller font, hosted by the Thompson Foundation. I glanced at Ethan. His eyes were scanning the room, taking it all in. He looked small against the backdrop of crystal and silver, but there was something in his posture, a set to his shoulders, that made him look bigger than he'd ever been in this space. Dad took the stage first, delivering his practiced welcome. He talked about the importance of mental health, about today's pressures, about our responsibility as a community. If you didn't know him, you'd think he'd been preaching this sermon his whole life. Then it was my turn. As I walked to the podium, I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. Some familiar, some strangers, all expectant. Mom's introduction echoed in my head. Our daughter Lily has always been passionate about this topic. She runs a blog that's been very impactful. I adjusted the microphone, feeling my hands shake just enough to be noticeable only to me. Good evening, I began. My voice sounded strange in the amplified air, but it didn't crack. My name is Lily. I'm here as a writer, yes, but mostly I'm here as Ethan's mom. I saw heads turn toward our table where he sat, cheeks flushed. When my son was born, I continued. I thought my job would be to teach him about the world. What I didn't realize was how much the world would teach me about him, and how much of that I'd need to unteach. A ripple of polite attention moved through the room. When he was little, I said he was the kid who cried at birthday parties because the noise was too much. The kid who covered his ears at fireworks. The kid who needed a warning before transitions. The kid who asked at 8 years old if he was a problem because the adults around him kept referring to his issues. I paused. The room was very quiet now. I was raised to believe that being strong meant being quiet, I said. That you swallowed your discomfort so you wouldn't make other people uncomfortable. That if something hurt you and no one else seemed bothered, the problem was you. A few people shifted in their seats. I recognized the look on some faces, the flicker of recognition, the quick shutdown. For a long time I continued. I tried to parent my son that way. Ignore it. It's not that bad. They meant well. I translated his anxiety into overreaction, his panic into misbehavior. I tried to fit him into spaces that were hurting him, because those spaces looked good on the outside. My mother's face was a pale frozen mask at our table. My father's jaw was tight. And then I said one Christmas. He watched a room full of adults pour all their attention and praise onto another child while he stood 5 feet away and received nothing. Not a speech, not a sentiment, not even a Merry Christmas with his name in it. A murmur rippled. People glanced at each other. It wasn't about the present, I said. It was about the message. He asked me later that night in the car. If I didn't have problems, would they like me more? He was 8. No child should be doing that math in their head. My voice shook on that last sentence. I let it. I was done sanding down the edges. That was the night I realized I said that the real issue wasn't his anxiety. It was the way some adults, including me, confused love with comfort, love that only exists when a child is easy, convenient, publicly impressive. That's not love, that's image management. The air felt charged now. I saw some people nodding, others looked distinctly uncomfortable. I had to make a choice, I said, between keeping everyone else comfortable, keeping the holidays smooth, keeping the family narratives intact, and protecting my son's sense of worth. I chose him. I let that sit. That choice cost me things I acknowledged. Relationships, traditions, approval. There are people in this room who think I'm overdramatic or ungrateful or cruel. That's okay. I've learned I can live with that. What I couldn't live with was my son learning from the people who were supposed to love him most that he was less deserving of joy because of how his brain works. A hush fell. So tonight, I said, as you listen to Ethan and the other young people speak, I'm asking you to do something that might be harder than writing a check or applauding a speech. I'm asking you to think about the kids in your own life, your children, your grandchildren, your students, and ask, who gets the ATVs and who gets the self-help books? Who gets the big speeches and who gets the silence? Who do you find easy to love and who are you secretly angry at for not being the kid you imagined? I saw a woman in the front row press her fingers to her mouth. A man near the back stared down at his program. If any of those questions sting, I said gently, I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to tell you you can choose differently. You can learn. You can apologize. You can sit in a therapist's office and listen instead of defending. You can stop saying, we meant well, and start asking, what did that feel like for you? I felt my throat tighten, but I pushed through. We don't get to go back and redo our kids' childhoods, I said. But we do get to decide what story we tell with the time we have left. Becoming a mental health advocate doesn't start with a fundraiser. It starts at your kitchen table in your living room, at your next family holiday, when a kid is overwhelmed and you decide whether to roll your eyes or sit beside them. I took a breath. Ethan is going to share his story in a moment. I said he's brave. Not because he's fixed or cured or normal now, but because he's willing to be seen as he is. I'm honored to be his mom. I hope after tonight you'll be honored to know him too, not as a symbol, as a person. I stepped back from the microphone, heart hammering in my chest. There was a beat of silence, the kind that feels like standing on the edge of a cliff. Then slowly people began to clap. Not the polite, enthusiastic clap that follows a good joke at a fundraiser. A slower, heavier sound like hands trying to catch up with something their owners didn't quite understand yet. I walked back to the table, my legs shaking. Ethan stood as I approached. He didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around me in front of everyone. Nice dress, he whispered into my shoulder. Nice, truth bomb. I laughed a little hysterically. You're up next, I whispered back, ready. He pulled back eyes calmer than mine. Yeah, he said. I think I've been ready since that Christmas. He walked toward the stage. As I watched my son climb the steps to the microphone, They'd set up for him in a room they'd paid for under a banner with their names on it. One thought cut through the noise. They'd wanted to use his voice to cleanse their image. Instead, we were about to use their platform to expose a pattern bigger than them. One that no matter how much money they raised, they could no longer pretend they weren't part of. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There are countless real-life betrayals, twists, and revenge stories waiting for you in the next episodes. Ethan took the stage like he was stepping onto thin ice he already knew would hold. He adjusted the mic down an inch, cleared his throat once. From where I sat, I could see the tremor in his hands, the rise and fall of his chest. No one else could. To the room he looked composed. To me he looked exactly like the 8-year-old, clutching my hand in the snow. "Hi," he said. "No good evening. No formal opener. Just that one small word amplified. My name is Ethan. I'm 15, I have generalized anxiety disorder." A few people shifted in their seats at the bluntness. Good, I thought. When I was little, he continued. I didn't have those words, I just knew that my brain got loud at times when everyone else's seemed quiet. Like when there were a lot of people talking, or when plans changed suddenly, or when I was supposed to be having fun. But all I wanted to do was hide in the bathroom. A low ripple of nervous laughter passed through the room. He didn't smile. "I thought that meant I was wrong," he said. "That I was built incorrectly because the adults around me didn't seem to understand." They rolled their eyes. "They told me to calm down," they said. "It's not that bad," or "You're overreacting." Sometimes they thought they were helping. Sometimes they were just embarrassed. He paused, letting that sit. "When you're a kid," he said quietly, "you don't know the difference between something is wrong and someone thinks something is wrong with you. It feels the same. It feels like you." My mother's hand flew to her necklace. My father stared straight ahead. "For a long time," Ethan went on, "I thought love was something you earned by being easy, by not making a fuss, by eating what was on your plate, even if it made you want to puke by going to loud places, even if it made your heart pound by smiling in photos, even if you'd just been crying in the bathroom." He looked down at his notes but didn't seem to need them. And then one day he said something happened that made it really clear to me how the adults in my life saw me. I'm not going to say what exactly because honestly, it doesn't matter what the object was. Let's just say it was a big, shiny thing. There were speeches, there was a whole ceremony, there was a lot of, "You're so amazing," and "You're our favorite," and "We're so proud." A few people glanced at the fundraising displays against the wall. Photos of kids on playgrounds, bright graphics. I watched my parents carefully not move. Standing a few feet away, Ethan said, was another kid. Same age, same family, same event. He didn't get a speech. He didn't get a big shiny thing. He got a small gift that basically said, "Fix yourself." He got to watch the celebration and pretend he wasn't being erased. The room had gone very still. "That kid was me," he said simply. You could feel the air change. I remember sitting in the car afterward, he continued, and asking my mom if people would like me more if I didn't have problems. If I could just turn the anxiety off. That's a really messed up question for an 8-year-old to have to ask. But I did. And the worst part is I kind of already knew the answer. I swallowed hard. A memory flashed, his small voice in the dark car. If I didn't have problems, would they get me something too? For the adults involved, he said that day was just another holiday. They meant well, they always do. They would probably be really shocked to hear me talk about it like this. They might even feel attacked. He glanced up, eyes scanning the crowd. He didn't stop on anyone, but he didn't have to. "But here's the thing I want you to hear," he said. "When you're a kid, it doesn't matter what the adults meant. It matters what you felt, and what I felt was, I am less. I am harder to love. I am a problem. They are tired of solving." Someone drew in a sharp breath. "It could have been my mother. It could have been me." "I'm not saying this, so you'll feel sorry for me," he said. "I have a good life. I have friends. I have a dog that steals my socks. I have a mom who listens to me even when I wish she wouldn't." A few people laughed. I smiled through the tightness in my chest. I'm saying it because I know I'm not the only kid this has happened to. He shifted his weight, shoulders squaring. "There are kids right now," he said, "in this town, maybe in this room, who are getting the message that they are too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too dramatic, too needy. Kids whose panic attacks are called tantrums. Kids whose meltdowns are punished instead of understood. Kids who are watching their siblings or cousins or classmates get the big speeches while they get told to be grateful for whatever crumbs are left. He leaned closer to the mic. I want to say to those kids, if you're listening, you are not broken. There is nothing wrong with needing extra help. There is nothing wrong with having a brain that gets overloaded. The adults might not get it yet. Some of them might never. That sucks. But it's not your fault. He straightened. And I want to say to the adults, he said, his voice suddenly sharper, if you are hearing yourself in this and feeling defensive, that is not a sign you should shut down. It is a sign you should wake up. A murmur again, quieter this time. You don't get to control whether your kids or grandkids or students have anxiety, he said. You do get to control whether you make it worse. You get to decide if you're going to be the person they remember as the one who sat with them on the steps when they couldn't go into the party, or the person they remember as the one who laughed and told them to get over it. His eyes flicked toward our table just for a second. You also don't get to skip over your part in the story just because you've decided to be supportive. Now, he continued, if you used to ignore a kid's pain and now you want to be an advocate, that's great. Seriously, growth is good, but don't pretend you were always on their side. Don't use their diagnosis as a way to get attention or praise. Don't host fancy events about mental health if you're not willing to have hard conversations at Thanksgiving. I heard someone near the front choke on a laugh that turned into a cough. I'm here tonight, Ethan said. Not because my anxiety is cured. It's not. Some mornings my brain still tells me the whole world is going to fall apart because I forgot to answer a text. Some nights I still count my breaths until I fall asleep. I'm here because enough adults decided to do the scary thing. Listen, learn. Change my therapist, my teachers, my mom. He looked at me, then fully. The room disappeared for a second. She chose me, he said simply, over being comfortable, over keeping everyone else happy, over pretending. That choice saved my life, even if I'm only just now figuring out how much. My vision blurred. I blinked quickly, unwilling to miss a second. If you take anything from what I'm saying, he finished, let it be this. Love is not how big the present is. Love is how willing you are to sit in discomfort, so the kids you say you care about don't have to sit in it alone. He smiled, then small and a little crooked. Thank you for listening, he said. I hope you do more than that when you go home. He stepped back from the mic. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Real, thick, stunned silence. Then the applause came. Not everyone stood, but some did. Enough that the scrape of chairs echoed off the high ceiling. A few people wiped at their eyes. I saw Lauren from the community center clapping so hard her hands had to hurt. At our table, my mother clapped mechanically, eyes glassy. My father clapped too, his face unreadable. Ethan walked back toward us. As he passed, a few people reached out, a hand on his arm, a murmured, "Thank you." He nodded, awkward but accepting. He sat down, exhaling like he'd just run a race. You were incredible, I whispered. I didn't puke, he whispered back. So that's a win. I laughed, the sound shaky. You did more than not puke. You told the truth in this room. That's huge. He shrugged, but there was relief in his eyes. If even one person thinks, before they call their kid, too sensitive, next time, he said, then it was worth it. The rest of the program went on. Video montage, speeches, dinner. People kept stopping by our table to congratulate him, to tell me how brave he was. How articulate. I smiled and thanked them, and tried not to think about how their own kids might be doing at home. My parents didn't say much during the meal. Mom pushed her food around her plate. Dad focused very hard on the auction paddles and the numbers on the screen. When the dessert plates were cleared and people started drifting toward the bar, my mother leaned in. Can we talk? She asked, voice thin. I looked at Ethan. You okay if I step outside for a minute? I asked. He nodded. I'm going to find Lauren, he said. She said she'd show me the donation board. I watched him walk away, then followed my parents toward a side hallway lined with framed photos of the club's founders, mostly old white men with serious faces. We ended up in a small sitting room, the kind meant for private conversations and business deals. For a moment, no one said anything. Mom sat down on a floral armchair. Dad remained standing, hands in his pockets. I stayed by the doorway in case I needed a quick escape. Mom began, then stopped. She swallowed. Quite a speech. Which one, I asked, mine or his? Both, she said. Yours was harsh. It was honest, I said. And his dad said slowly was convicting. He said the word like it tasted strange. He's a good speaker, I said. He's been practicing telling the truth for a while now. Mom clasped her hands together. We didn't realize, she said. We didn't realize he felt that way. About that Christmas. You didn't ask, I said quietly. She flinched. We were just trying to make it special for Sophie, she said. It wasn't meant to be. I know, I cut in. It wasn't meant to be anything. That's the point. You meant something nice for one child and didn't think at all about the other. The impact was still there. Dad exhaled long and slow. Look, he said. We're here, aren't we? We organized this. We're raising a lot of money tonight. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for something, I said. It doesn't erase everything. We're trying, Mom said, voice cracking. We're trying to change. We came to the town hall. We've been reading up. We've been talking to people. When we saw Ethan on the news, we were so proud. Don't we get any credit for that? You get credit for what you're doing now, I said. Yes, the center will get another therapist. Kids will get care they wouldn't have had otherwise. That's good. It doesn't retroactively make ignoring his anxiety. Okay, you don't get to skip the part where you look him in the eye and acknowledge that. Mom's face crumpled a little. We didn't. We didn't know how bad it was, she said. We thought you were exaggerating. You always were so emotional. I nodded slowly. I was, I said. Because I learned that was the only way to maybe get taken seriously. Apparently, it still didn't work. Dad ran a hand over his jaw. He looked older. He was older. What do you want from us? He asked. And for once, it didn't sound like a challenge. It sounded like a real question. I considered. I want you to stop defending yourselves, I said. Just for a minute. Just listen to him, to what he said, to what I've been saying for years. I want you to sit with the possibility that you hurt him, that you hurt me. Not because you're monsters, but because you refuse to change. Mom's eyes filled. We love you, she whispered. We've always loved you. I know you think you do, I said, but love without curiosity about how you might be hurting someone is not enough anymore. Not for me, not for him. She covered her mouth with her hand. So that's it, she asked. We're just terrible. No, I said. You're complicated. Like everyone. You did good things and harmful things. Tonight you're doing a good thing. Years ago, you did something that hurt my kid. Both are true. Dad sat down slowly as if his legs had given up. Is there any way back? He asked, staring at the carpet. To something? Not what it was, but something. I thought of Ethan's speech, of the line about skipping over your part in the story. That's not my question to answer anymore, I said. It's his. If you want some kind of relationship with him, you're going to have to ask him. Not here. Not tonight. In a smaller room, without the chandeliers and the donation board. We can do that, Mom said quickly. We can come over. Or you can bring him. No, I said, you don't set the terms, I do. Here's what I'm willing to consider. They both looked up the way people do when they're waiting to hear a sentence in court. In a few weeks, I said, if Ethan wants to, we can set up a session with Dr. Patel. All of us, you, me, him. Maybe Amanda, if he wants her there. You will listen. You will not argue. You will not say, back in our day. You will not cry so hard he ends up comforting you. You will not use the phrase, we meant well. You will say exactly 3 things. We're sorry we didn't understand. We want to do better. Then you will show up differently for a long time, without expecting a medal. They stared at me. That's a lot, Dad said. So is growing up thinking you're a problem, I replied. Mom nodded slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks in neat lines. Okay, she whispered. We'll try. I believed her in that moment. I also knew try didn't guarantee anything, but it was a start. And if he doesn't want that, Dad asked quietly, then you respect that. I said, you don't send guilt emails. You don't go on a campaign with relatives. You sit with the loss. You learn from it. You donate to causes like this and know that you're helping other kids. even if you didn't manage to help your own in time. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. There was something raw there I'd never seen before. I didn't know. He said softly I should have, but I didn't. That's the saddest sentence in the world, I said I didn't know. But now you do. What you do with that is your story. We sat in silence for a few seconds. The muffled sound of clinking glasses and distant laughter seeped under the door. I'm tired, I said. Finally, I'm going to go find my son. I stood. Mom reached for my hand, then seemed to think better of it and let it drop. We did raise a brave grandson, though, Dad said suddenly. I turned at the doorway. No, I said gently. You were part of raising a boy who had to be brave. There's a difference. I left them there in that pretty room with its heavy curtains and its portraits of men who'd never had to ask their parents not to hurt them. In the hallway, the air felt thinner, easier to breathe. I found Ethan near the donation board talking with Lauren. Someone had drawn a thermometer graphic showing the fundraiser's progress. The red bar was almost to the top. Hey, I said, touching his arm. He turned, eyes bright. Mom, they hit the stretch goal. Lauren says they can fund another therapist and maybe a part-time youth coordinator. That's like a big deal, right? That's a huge deal, I said. You helped make that happen. He shrugged, but he couldn't fully hide his pride. You okay? He asked, then looking more closely at my face. You were gone for a while. I talked to your grandparents, I said. They heard you, I think. They want to see you in therapy. If you want that, he considered. Do you want that, I asked. He thought longer, I think. He said carefully. I want to say some things to them, but I want Dr. Patel there. And I want to be able to leave if it feels bad. That's exactly what I offered, I said. He nodded, satisfied. Then yeah, someday. Not right away, I need a break from their faces. I laughed, totally fair. We left the club an hour later with a plastic-wrapped centerpiece Lauren insisted we take, and a check made out to the community center that had more zeros than any I'd ever seen up close. In the car, the night felt strangely familiar. Dark, quiet snow starting to fall again in lazy flakes. Remember the Christmas with the ATV? Ethan asked, suddenly staring out the window. As if I could forget, I said. If you could go back, he said. Would you do anything different? I thought about that for a long time. Yes, I said I would have left earlier. I would have told them right then that what they did was hurtful. I would have told you in the car that you were allowed to be mad, that it wasn't just something to get over. He nodded slowly. But if you'd done that, would we be here now? With the blog and the group and the fundraiser and everything. I smiled a little sadly. Maybe, maybe not. Payne tends to find a microphone eventually. He turned toward me, studying my profile in the dashboard light. Do you ever feel bad, he asked, about tonight? Like, was it mean what we did? He didn't say the word revenge, but it hovered between us. I feel many things, I said honestly. I feel proud of you. I feel relieved. I feel a little sad. Because I saw their faces. They were genuinely hurt, and I know some part of them loves us. It's just tangled up in their own stuff. I took a breath, but I don't feel sorry for telling the truth. I said, we didn't name them. We didn't scream. We didn't lie. We pointed at a pattern and said, this hurt. It still hurts other kids. You can do better. If that feels like an attack to them, that's because it hit something real. He nodded slowly. So it's like Dr. Patel said. He murmured, telling someone they stepped on your foot isn't the same as punching them in the face. Exactly, I said, still uncomfortable, not the same. We drove the rest of the way in companionable silence. When we pulled into our driveway, the snow had started sticking a thin white layer, softening the edges of the world. Inside, our little house felt almost comically small after the club's high ceilings. But it felt like ours. Ethan kicked off his dress shoes with a sigh of relief, tugged at his tie until it came loose. So he said, dropping onto the couch, next time I have to talk in front of people, can it be like a class presentation instead of a fancy fundraiser about my entire brain? I laughed. We'll see what we can arrange. He flipped on the TV some sitcom rerun, filling the room with canned laughter. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching him be a kid. Not a symbol, not a narrative device. Just a human slouched sideways, one sock on, one sock off. A few days later, I wrote about the night. I didn't name the club. I didn't name my parents. I called it an upscale venue. I called them relatives. I called Ethan, my son again. The post was titled, "When the World Finally Calls Your Dramatic Kid Brave." I wrote about the strange feeling of watching the same people who once rolled their eyes at his anxiety, now applauding it on stage. I wrote about the temptation to let that applause rewrite the past. I wrote about what it meant to hold both the harm and the help, the injury and the repair. The post traveled farther than anything I'd written before. Bigger sites asked to republish it. A podcast interviewed me. A therapist in another state emailed to say she used it in a group for grandparents. I watched the numbers climb and thought of my parents somewhere on the other side of town, maybe hearing about some article from a friend. Dr. Patel coordinated the future session. Ethan chose a date in March, giving himself time to recover from the fundraiser first. We talked about it with him, not over him. We made backup plans. We agreed on a signal he could use if he wanted to leave. Whether it would lead to real change, I didn't know, but for once, not knowing didn't paralyze me. It just felt honest. Our next Christmas was quiet. We didn't go to my parents' house. We didn't watch anyone unveil anything in the front yard. We slept in. We made pancakes that were questionably shaped, but fully edible. We watched movies in pajamas. In the afternoon, we suited up in coats and boots and walked to the sledding hill near the park. Someone's older kid rode an ATV around the edges of the field, towing a plastic sled behind him. The engine buzzed. The snow kicked up behind. Ethan watched for a minute, then grinned. "Looks fun," he said. "Also looks like a broken arm waiting to happen." "We'll stick to gravity," I said. We took turns on the cheap red sled I'd bought at a hardware store. We crashed into snowbanks. We ended up soaked and breathless, cheeks flushed. At one point, as he trudged back up the hill, sled rope in hand, Ethan glanced back at me. "Hey, Mom," he called. "Yeah, thanks for not getting me an ATV," he said, smirking. I laughed anytime. He came to stand next to me, watching the other kids zoom. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "it's weird. Sometimes I think about that Christmas and I still feel sad and mad. And then I think about everything that happened because of it. Therapy, the blog, the group last week. And I feel, I don't know, not glad it happened, but glad we did something with it." "That's called making meaning," I said softly. "It's one of the only kinds of magic I believe in." He nodded solemn. "So," he said, "if someone asked me now, would you trade all of that to have had a normal Christmas with people who understood you from the start?" I'd probably say yes. He shrugged. "But since I can't, I'm okay with this version too." My throat tightened. "Yeah," I said. "Me too." We stood there a while longer, watching the ATV circle the sleds slide. The sky turned slowly pink around the edges. My parents would always have that first story, the one where they unveiled the big gift. Adored child screaming with joy, neighbors, jealous hearts full. Let them keep it. We had the second story now, the one where a forgotten boy asked a question in a car, and a door quietly closed and another opened. The one where a blog turned into a room of mismatched chairs, and then into a fundraiser, and then into something like a movement. The one where revenge wasn't fire and salt, but boundaries and truth, and a refusal to disappear. The one where years after a shiny machine stole the spotlight on a winter night, the kid in the shadows stood under a much harsher light and said, "I was there, I remember, and I matter." Snowflakes landed on my eyelashes, melting instantly. "Ready to go again?" Ethan asked, yanking the sled rope. "Always," I said. He took off running, and I ran after him, the hill ahead of us, the past behind us, and a future that for the first time felt more like something we were writing than something happening to us.